The night was a deep blue, the kind that swallowed everything in silence. But then, a scream tore through the quiet, sharp and piercing like shattered glass. Daisy stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't tell if the sound had come from outside or if it was lodged deep in her mind. The woods around her whispered, the trees swaying like figures cloaked in shadows. She didn't know why she had come here, to this forgotten place. But something, or someone, was waiting, and she had to find out. In the distance, faint footsteps crunched on the damp earth. Someone was close, too close. She turned to run, but a hand reached out from the darkness, cold as death itself. Daisy screamed, the echo lost in the night. And then, just as suddenly, the hand was gone. She stood alone, trembling, the scent of pine thick in the air. The shadows seemed to close in, and she whispered to herself, "Not tonight. Please, not tonight." Daisy's pulse raced as she fumbled through the trees, her breath ragged. Ahead, a faint glow pierced the darkness. As she pushed through the underbrush, a figure emerged, a man, tall and shrouded in a long coat. He stood at the edge of the clearing, unmoving. His face was hidden beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat, but his presence radiated menace. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice gravelly, like stones scraping against metal. Daisy froze, her body rigid. She had no words, no explanations for why she had ventured this far. All she knew was that she needed answers. The man stepped closer, his boots crunching softly on the ground. "There's always a price, you know," he whispered, barely audible. "For every secret uncovered, something is lost." His words hung in the air, thick with foreboding. "What do you want?" Daisy asked, her voice small, barely a tremor against the night. The man smiled, but it was a smile that held no warmth. "Everything." As the man's words settled in, a sudden gust of wind swept through the clearing, making the trees shiver. Daisy took a step back, the weight of his gaze pinning her in place. Something was wrong, deeply, irrevocably wrong. She didn't know who he was, but she felt in her bones that his presence was a turning point, a warning she should heed. "Leave now," he growled, "before the darkness consumes you too." His voice was a low rumble, as if the very earth beneath them trembled at his command. Daisy turned and fled, her heart pounding in time with her footsteps, the sense of impending doom pressing in on all sides. Daisy ran until her lungs burned, her legs aching with each step. She didn't stop until she reached the old road, the one no one used anymore. It was cracked and overgrown, the kind of place you only found in old maps and forgotten memories. But as she stood there, panting in the cold night air, a question clawed at her mind. How had she known to come here? Behind her, the woods were silent again, the stranger gone as if he'd never existed. But Daisy knew better. He was out there, watching, waiting, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he wouldn't be the last. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the trees, but the warmth it offered was cold comfort. Daisy returned to the edge of the woods, where an old house stood, long abandoned. The paint was peeling, the windows cracked, but it called to her. She stepped inside, the wooden floors groaning underfoot. Dust clung to the air, thick and suffocating. As she ventured deeper into the house, she saw it, scrawled on the walls in deep crimson, all the colors of the dark. Daisy's fingers grazed the words on the wall, the paint still fresh. But it wasn't paint, was it? She recoiled, wiping her hand on her jeans, her mind racing. Who had written this, and why was it in blood? She moved further into the house, her steps careful, cautious. In the corner of the living room, something caught her eye. A small box, wrapped in faded velvet, sat atop a dusty table. Slowly, she approached, her heart thundering in her chest. As she opened the box, a chill ran down her spine. Inside lay a single black feather, delicate and shimmering, and beneath it, a note: the truth awaits, but be warned, once you see, you can never go back. As Daisy read the note, the house groaned, as if it too held secrets buried deep within its walls. A faint whisper carried through the air, indistinguishable at first, but it grew louder, clearer. "Find it," the voice said, echoing through the empty rooms. She spun around, expecting to see someone standing behind her, but she was alone. Or was she? Her breath quickened as the temperature dropped. Daisy realized then that this house, wasn't just abandoned, it was haunted, and it held more than memories of the past. It was alive with the darkness of things unseen. Daisy clutched the black feather in her trembling hands, its surface slick and cold. She could feel it, the weight of the unknown pressing against her chest. This wasn't just an object. It was a symbol, a warning, a clue. The whisper in the air returned, this time more insistent, urging her to move deeper into the house. She stepped into the hallway, her footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The light dimmed as she walked further, and the walls seemed to close in. There was something waiting for her at the end of the hall, something she wasn't ready to face. The hallway seemed endless, stretching far beyond what should have been possible. Daisy's footsteps slowed as she felt the chill crawl up her spine. The walls around her creaked, and from the corners of her vision, she saw shadows that weren't there before, moving with intent, creeping closer. Her breath hitched. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice shaky and thin in the suffocating darkness. The air responded with silence, thick and heavy. She quickened her pace, the urgency pulling her forward, though her instincts screamed to turn back. But the feather in her hand felt like an anchor, and the note's words echoed in her mind, the truth awaits. At the end of the hallway stood a door, old and weathered, its wood splintered as though it had been beaten by time itself. A faint light seeped through the cracks, pulsing softly. Daisy's hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitant but compelled by a force she couldn't name. When she finally gripped the cold brass knob, a jolt shot through her arm, and the door creaked open, revealing a room that felt like a different world. Inside, the air shimmered with dust, illuminated by a single candle flickering on an old oak desk. Papers were scattered everywhere, but it was the large, leather-bound book in the center that caught her attention. She approached slowly, her fingers brushing the cover. The title, barely legible in faded gold script, "Read All the Colors of the Dark." As her fingers traced the letters on the book's cover, a low hum filled the room, like the vibration of a distant storm. Daisy's heart pounded in her ears as she slowly opened the book, its pages brittle with age. The moment the book lay open, the candle flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows on the walls. The pages were filled with strange symbols and sketches, some of which made her stomach churn with unease. But amidst the drawings, a voice, soft and distant, began to rise. It was coming from the pages, whispering her name. Daisy stared at the symbols as they began to shift and morph, revealing hidden words. The past is written in shadows, but the future bleeds into light. Choose wisely, for the path ahead is dark. Suddenly, the room felt tighter, the walls pressing inward as though the house itself was breathing. The voice from the book faded into silence, but Daisy knew it wasn't gone, it was waiting. She could feel it, the weight of expectation in the air. She had opened something that couldn't be closed. On the last page of the book, a crude drawing of a doorway loomed, and beneath it, written in jagged script, "Will you enter?" Daisy swallowed hard, her mouth dry. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to run as far from this cursed place as possible. But something stronger, curiosity, desperation, or perhaps something darker, kept her rooted to the spot. Daisy closed the book, its weight heavy in her hands, the decision clawing at her mind. She had seen enough to know that whatever lay ahead was far more dangerous than she had imagined. But turning back wasn't an option anymore. This wasn't just a house, and the stranger in the woods wasn't just a man. They were connected, bound by forces that had long been forgotten, but were waking now. She glanced back at the hallway, but the door she'd come through had vanished. The only path left was forward. She tucked the feather into her jacket pocket, gripped the book tighter, and made her choice. She stepped toward the shadows, ready to face whatever awaited her on the other side. As Daisy crossed the threshold, the air seemed to hum with energy. Her skin tingled, and for a brief moment, she felt weightless, as though gravity itself had lost its hold on her. The room around her dissolved into darkness, but this wasn't like the shadowy hallways of the house. It was vast, endless, like stepping into a void. And then, as if drawn by invisible threads, light appeared, soft at first, but growing brighter. Shapes formed in the distance, landscapes unfurling as though the world was being painted before her eyes. Mountains, valleys, and rivers shimmered into existence. But this was no ordinary world. The colors were all wrong. The sky was a deep shade of violet, and the trees shimmered with silver leaves. Daisy realized with a sinking feeling that she wasn't just in another room, she had crossed into another realm. The landscape stretched out in front of her, but it wasn't empty. In the distance, figures moved, some human, others not. The air here was thick with whispers, voices that seemed to come from the very ground beneath her feet. They spoke in a language she couldn't understand, but the tone was unmistakable, a warning. Daisy gripped the book tighter, her heart pounding as she walked further into this strange world. She felt as though the shadows were watching her, waiting for her to make a misstep. But she pressed on, driven by the need to understand what had brought her here and why. The whispers grew louder, the ground beneath her feet shifting as if alive. And soon, she would realize this place had its own rules, and they were far from kind. The silver-leafed trees swayed despite the absence of wind, casting long shadows that twisted like living things. Daisy's footsteps crunched softly on the vibrant violet grass. But beneath that, she heard something else, something watching. She stopped, holding her breath, her heart thudding against her chest. From the tree line, a pair of glowing eyes blinked into existence. They were sharp and predatory, fixated on her every move. Daisy stepped back instinctively, but the eyes followed. Closer now. She reached into her pocket for the feather, her fingers trembling. A low growl echoed through the air, sending a shiver down her spine. Whatever this creature was, it didn't belong to the world she knew. It was part of this place, this dark realm that seemed to warp reality itself. Daisy knew she had two choices, run or stand her ground. But before she could make a decision, a voice, familiar and smooth, sliced through the tension. "You're not alone here, Daisy." Daisy turned, her breath catching in her throat. Standing a few paces behind her was the man from the woods, the one who had given her the feather. He stepped out from the shadows, his eyes gleaming with a knowledge that made her uneasy. "You again?" she asked, her voice a mixture of relief and suspicion. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly, the corners of his mouth lifting ever so slightly. "I told you, I'm a guide of sorts. You're far deeper into this now than you realize." The creature in the trees growled again, but it didn't advance. Instead, it seemed to retreat slightly at the presence of the stranger. Daisy noticed the way the shadows shifted around him, as though bending to his will. "Why are you helping me?" Daisy asked, her voice edged with distrust. The man's eyes darkened, though his smile remained. "Let's just say we have mutual interests. The book you carry, it's not an ordinary book, and what it can unlock, well, it could change everything." Daisy's grip on the book tightened, a sinking feeling settling in her stomach. She had stumbled into something far more dangerous than she'd imagined. The man stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "But be careful, Daisy. This world, it's a maze of choices. and not all paths lead to light. The shadows here are hungry. They will test you, tempt you, and if you let them, they will consume you. His words sent a chill through her. Daisy glanced around at the distorted landscape, the strange shapes that seemed to shift and move just beyond her line of sight. There was a tension in the air, a feeling that this place was alive in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why am I here?" The stranger's smile faded, his expression serious. "Because you're connected to something ancient, something powerful, and whether you like it or not, you're a part of this story now." Before Daisy could ask more, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving her alone once again. The creature in the trees was gone too, but its presence lingered like a threat. Daisy stood there for a moment, absorbing the weight of the stranger's words. She felt the pull of the book in her hands, a strange warmth emanating from it as though it were alive. Whatever this world was, she had become entangled in it, and there was no turning back. Taking a deep breath, she turned her attention to the path ahead. The landscape stretched out before her, but in the distance, she could see something, an archway of stone, shimmering with an otherworldly light. It beckoned her, the only solid landmark in this shifting, dreamlike world. As she walked, her mind raced. Who was the stranger really? And why did he seem to know so much about her? The warning he had given echoed in her ears. The shadows are hungry. Every step felt like a leap into the unknown. But Daisy knew one thing for sure, there was no escape from this now. Whatever was hidden in the pages of all the colors of the dark, it had chosen her, and she would have to face it, no matter the cost. The archway loomed closer with every step, casting a strange glow that seemed to pulse in time with Daisy's heartbeat. As she neared it, a strange sensation washed over her, as if time itself had slowed. The air around the arch felt heavier, more tangible, like stepping into a different layer of reality. Daisy reached out to touch the stone, its surface smooth and cool beneath her fingertips. The moment her hand made contact, a flood of images raced through her mind, memories that weren't hers. She saw flashes of a life lived long ago, a woman standing in the same spot, holding the same book. The woman's face was obscured, but her fear was palpable. The memory ended abruptly, leaving Daisy breathless. She pulled her hand back, her heart racing. Whoever the woman had been, she had faced the same path, the same choice. Daisy realized with growing dread that this wasn't the first time someone had been pulled into the darkness, and it likely wouldn't be the last. Suddenly, the archway's light flared, blinding in its intensity. Daisy shielded her eyes, taking a step back. When the light faded, she saw him, a figure standing in the center of the arch, tall and imposing, cloaked in shadows. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but his presence was undeniable. "You've come far," the figure said, his voice deep and resonant, echoing in the stillness of the realm. "But every journey has its price." Daisy swallowed, her throat dry. "Who are you?" "I am the keeper of this gate," he replied. "I guard what lies beyond." "What's beyond?" Daisy asked, her voice trembling slightly. The keeper's hood tilted as if considering her question. "The truth. But truth is not given freely. You must earn it." Daisy clenched the book tighter, her mind spinning. She had come too far to turn back now. Whatever truth awaited her beyond the gate, she had to face it. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. The keeper stepped aside, the archway glowing once more, then stepped through, and faced the darkness. Daisy stared at the glowing archway, its light casting long shadows behind her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she considered the keeper's words. The truth was never given freely, but what price would she have to pay? There was no time to ponder. The pull of the unknown, the need for answers, was stronger than her fear. Taking a deep breath, Daisy stepped forward and crossed the threshold. The moment she did, the air around her shifted. The oppressive stillness of the dark realm dissolved, replaced by a rush of wind and the distant sound of whispers. She stumbled, feeling as though she had passed through a veil of reality itself. When she regained her footing, she looked up and gasped. The world beyond the arch was nothing like what she had imagined. The darkness that had surrounded her now gave way to a sprawling landscape of stars, as though she had stepped into the night sky itself. Floating islands drifted in the air, tethered by shimmering threads of light. The ground beneath her feet was translucent, glowing faintly as if lit from within. But even in this strange beauty, something felt off. The whispers she had heard grew louder, filling the air with fragmented words, half-formed thoughts, and secrets. Daisy gripped the book tighter, her pulse racing. She had crossed into a world where reality and illusion blurred, where the very fabric of existence felt unstable. And at the heart of it all, the truth she sought waited, hidden, perhaps, in the darkest corners of this place. The whispers grew louder, wrapping around Daisy like tendrils. They seemed to come from everywhere at once, yet nowhere she could pinpoint. They were voices, but not in any language she could understand, at least, not at first. As she walked further into the starry expanse, the voices began to merge, becoming clearer. They spoke of fear, of loss, of choices made in desperation. Daisy shivered, realizing that these weren't just random murmurs. These were the voices of those who had crossed the threshold before her. They had been here, lost in the same maze of truth and deception. Some had sought power, others redemption, but all had paid the price. The weight of their decisions lingered in the air, and Daisy couldn't help but wonder, would she meet the same fate? Her pace quickened, but the voices seemed to follow her, growing more urgent, pleading. Daisy clamped her hands over her ears, but it did nothing to drown out their cries. "You're one of us now," a voice whispered near her ear, cold and breathy. "You'll never escape." Panic surged in Daisy's chest, but she forced herself to keep moving. There had to be a way out, a way to silence the voices. She wasn't like them. She hadn't come here to get lost in the dark. She had come for answers, and she wouldn't leave without them. Ahead of her, amidst the stars and floating islands, Daisy saw it, a massive mirror, its surface rippling like water. It stood alone, surrounded by a circle of ancient stones that glowed faintly in the darkness. The air around it was thick with energy, a buzzing tension that made her skin prickle. Daisy approached cautiously, her breath catching in her throat. The mirror was unlike anything she had ever seen. It seemed to reflect not only her appearance but the very essence of who she was, her fears, her desires, her memories. It was as if the mirror could see through her, down to the core of her being. For a long moment, Daisy hesitated. The voices had fallen silent, as if waiting for her next move. She knew instinctively that this mirror held the key to the truth she sought. But she also knew that whatever she saw in its reflection could change her forever. Taking a deep breath, Daisy stepped forward and gazed into the mirror. At first, her reflection seemed normal, but then, as she stared, it began to shift. The image of herself rippled and blurred, and suddenly, she was no longer looking at herself. She was looking at her past, scenes from her life flashing before her eyes like a film reel. Her childhood, filled with moments of joy and sorrow. Her teenage years, full of rebellion and confusion. The loss of her parents. The loneliness that had followed. The isolation she had buried deep within herself. And then, the reflection changed again. This time, it showed her future, a future that branched in 1,000 different directions. Each one a possibility, each one shaped by the choices she had yet to make. Daisy's heart raced as she saw herself walking down countless paths, some leading to happiness, others to darkness. She saw versions of herself that she didn't recognize, some strong, others broken, and at the end of every path, she saw the same thing, the book. waiting for her. The mirror showed her the truth, not the truth of the world, but the truth of herself, the choices she had made, the ones she would make, and the consequences that would follow. The reflection twisted once more, but this time, it didn't show Daisy's life. Instead, it showed a woman standing in front of the mirror, a woman who looked strikingly familiar. Her dark hair was tied back, her eyes wide with fear and determination. She was older, worn by time and hardship, but there was no mistaking her. It was Daisy's mother. Daisy's breath caught in her throat. She had been too young to fully understand what had happened to her mother, why she had disappeared, but seeing her now, standing in the mirror, brought back a flood of memories, some comforting, others painful. Her mother had crossed into this world, just like her. Daisy's hands trembled as she reached out, her fingers brushing the cool surface of the mirror. The reflection of her mother remained still, her eyes fixed on Daisy's as if waiting for something, some acknowledgement, some unspoken truth to be shared between them. But before Daisy could speak, the reflection flickered, and her mother's image faded, replaced by darkness. The truth was slipping away, and with it, the chance to understand why her mother had come here and what it meant for Daisy's own journey. Daisy pulled back from the mirror, her mind swirling with unanswered questions. But one thing was clear now, this wasn't just her story. It was her mother's as well, and the choices she made now would echo through the past, the present, and the future. Daisy stood in silence, the weight of her mother's presence still heavy in the air. The reflection had vanished, but the impact of what she had seen lingered. She clenched her fists, her mind racing with possibilities. What had her mother been searching for? Was it the same truth Daisy sought, or something else altogether? The feeling of loss was palpable, but now it was intertwined with a deep desire for understanding. The dark realm around her pulsed with energy, as if the entire place was alive and watching her. Daisy knew she couldn't turn back. Whatever had brought her mother here, and whatever fate had befallen her, Daisy had to continue. She couldn't let her story end the same way. With a final glance at the mirror, Daisy pressed on. The whispers were growing faint, as though they, too, were waiting for her next step. She felt a tug in her chest, not of fear, but of resolve. She was no longer walking just for herself, she was walking for her mother, too. A few steps beyond the mirror, Daisy encountered something unexpected. The keeper of secrets, the one who had spoken to her before, appeared once more. His form was tall and shadowy, his face obscured by a hood. His voice slithered through the air, both cold and curious. "You've seen the mirror," the keeper said. "You've touched the past, but the truth you seek remains elusive." Daisy's heart pounded, her hands still shaking from the vision of her mother. "What do you know about her?" she demanded, her voice trembling with both fear and anger. The keeper tilted his head. "Your mother came here with the same fire in her heart. She was a seeker of truths, but in this place, not all truths can be found. Some are too dangerous to reveal." Daisy's throat tightened. "What happened to her? Tell me." The keeper's shadowy form rippled, as if the air itself was alive around him. "The mirror shows you not only what is, but what could be. Your mother faced her own choices, just as you will. Her path was her own, as yours is now." Daisy's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. "I'm not leaving without answers." The keeper's cold laughter echoed in the void. "Then you must face the test. Only the worthy can continue." Before Daisy could respond, the ground beneath her shifted, the stars above dimmed, and the floating islands began to swirl, moving as though the entire realm was rearranging itself around her. The keeper's form dissolved into the darkness, and Daisy was left alone once more, this time, in a place that seemed even more alien and hostile. Daisy blinked as her surroundings took shape. The once open, starry expanse was gone, replaced by a maze of tall, stone walls that twisted and turned in every direction. The air was thick with tension, the shadows along the walls shifting as though they were alive. She could feel it, the test had begun. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of her situation. There was no map, no guide, only her instincts. The book, still clutched tightly in her hand, pulsed with a soft, rhythmic beat, as though it were alive. Daisy took a deep breath and began to walk, her footsteps echoing in the narrow corridors. The maze seemed endless, with each turn leading to more confusion, but as she moved, something strange began to happen. The walls, once solid and unchanging, started to flicker. In their place, Daisy saw flashes of her own memories, moments from her past, both distant and recent. She saw herself as a child, running through fields with her mother, laughing in the sun. She saw the darker times, too, the loneliness after her parents were gone, the restless nights searching for meaning. The maze wasn't just a physical test, it was a test of her mind, her heart, her very identity. Every step she took felt like peeling back another layer of herself, exposing truths she had long buried. After what felt like hours of walking, Daisy finally reached the center of the maze. Her legs ached, and her mind was swirling with the weight of the memories she had seen. But the moment she stepped into the heart of the labyrinth, everything became still. In the center stood a pedestal, upon which sat an object, small and unassuming, yet pulsing with power. It was a crystal, its surface glowing with the same light that had guided Daisy through the darkness. But as she approached, she realized that this was no ordinary crystal. Inside it, swirling like a storm, were fragments of the same truths she had seen in the mirror. The moment Daisy reached out to touch it, she felt a jolt of energy surge through her. Images flooded her mind, visions of her mother, of the dark realm, of the choices she would have to make. The crystal pulsed in her hand, growing warmer as though responding to her very thoughts. Daisy closed her eyes, letting the energy flow through her. She understood now. The answers she sought wouldn't be handed to her, they would have to be earned, piece by piece, through every step she took. And this crystal, this fragment of the truth, was just the beginning. Daisy stepped out of the maze, the crystal still clutched tightly in her hand. The stars above had returned, and the floating islands once again drifted peacefully in the sky. But something had changed within her. She felt stronger, more focused. The whispers, once overwhelming and confusing, had grown quieter, their presence now a distant hum. The test had shown her not only the truth of her own past, but also a glimpse of the greater truth that lay ahead. Her journey wasn't just about finding answers, it was about accepting the choices she had made and the person she had become. As Daisy looked out across the dark realm, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just seeking the truth for herself anymore. She was walking the path her mother had started, and she would finish what her mother could not. With the crystal's light guiding her, Daisy pressed forward. The keeper's words echoed in her mind, only the worthy can continue. And she would prove her worth, no matter the cost. Daisy's journey beyond the maze was eerily quiet. The stars blinked above her, and the dark realm felt more vast and infinite than ever. But as her feet carried her forward, her heart pounded with a mix of dread and anticipation. The crystal in her hand was warm, pulsing like a heartbeat. She knew it held part of the truth she sought, but it was not complete. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath her, and a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall, imposing, and armored, the being stood in her path, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. He was unlike the keeper. This figure felt ancient, his presence exuding authority and danger. Daisy instinctively tightened her grip on the crystal. "You carry the fragment," the guardian spoke, his voice deep and resonant, shaking the air around her. "But it is not yet time for you to wield its power." Daisy swallowed hard, but she held her ground. "I've come too far to stop now." I need answers. The guardian's eyes narrowed. Many have come seeking answers. Few leave with the truth they desire. He took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. Your mother was one of them. Daisy's chest tightened at the mention of her mother. What happened to her? She demanded, her voice rising with emotion. The guardian's expression was unreadable. She, too, sought the truth, but the truth is a burden, not a gift. Your mother discovered that too late. Will you? Daisy's breath caught in her throat as the guardian's words sank in. The truth, a burden? But wasn't that what she had been searching for all this time? She had followed the whispers, uncovered pieces of the past. And now, she stood closer than ever to unlocking the secrets that had consumed her life. But the guardian's warning echoed in her mind. She had seen the pain her mother had endured, felt the weight of it in the visions and memories. Was that what awaited her if she continued on this path? I don't care about the risks, Daisy said, her voice firmer now. If my mother could face the truth, so can I, whatever the cost. I need to know what happened. The guardian tilted his head slightly, studying her with those piercing eyes. Every truth comes with a price, Daisy, he said, his tone somber. The deeper you search, the more you will lose. Knowledge does not come without sacrifice. Daisy felt a chill run down her spine, but she refused to back down. Then I'll pay that price. For a long moment, the guardian was silent, his gaze locked on hers. Then, with a heavy sigh, he stepped aside. Very well, but remember this, once you know, there is no turning back. You cannot unsee the truth. Without another word, the guardian vanished into the darkness, leaving Daisy alone once more. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared into the void ahead. The path was clear, but the weight of the guardian's warning hung heavy over her. Still, she couldn't stop now. Gripping the crystal tightly, Daisy moved forward, her determination unwavering. She would find the truth, no matter what it took. The path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and turning through the dark realm like a serpent coiling in the shadows. Each step Daisy took felt heavier, the air thickening as if the very atmosphere was trying to slow her down. But she pressed on, her thoughts circling around the guardian's warning. What could be so terrible that even he had urged her to turn back? The whispering voices grew louder again, their tones shifting from incoherent murmurs to recognizable words. Daisy couldn't help but listen as they spoke of things long forgotten, secrets buried deep in the fabric of the world. Time has no mercy, one voice hissed. Truth devours those who seek it, whispered another. Despite the ominous words, Daisy felt drawn deeper into the heart of the darkness. She had come too far to stop now. Whatever awaited her, she would face it head-on. The crystal in her hand continued to pulse, as if guiding her forward, a beacon of light in the unyielding void. After what felt like an eternity, Daisy saw a faint glow ahead. As she drew closer, she realized it wasn't just a light, it was a doorway, shimmering with a strange, ethereal energy. It seemed both inviting and foreboding at once, as though crossing its threshold would change everything. Daisy stood before the glowing doorway, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the final step before the truth. The whispers around her had fallen silent, as though they, too, were waiting to see if she would cross. She reached out, her hand trembling as her fingers brushed the surface of the doorway. The energy that flowed through it was unlike anything she had ever felt before, powerful, ancient, and filled with the weight of countless secrets. The crystal in her hand grew warmer, responding to the presence of the doorway. With a deep breath, Daisy stepped through. The world around her shifted instantly. Gone was the dark, starry realm she had been traversing. Now, she stood in a place that felt both real and unreal, a vast hall lined with mirrors, each reflecting a different version of herself. Some mirrors showed her as she was, while others displayed images of her life that had never come to pass. In one mirror, She saw herself as a child, laughing with her parents in a sunlit garden. In another, she was older, sitting alone in a small, dimly lit room, her face etched with sorrow. Each reflection seemed to hold a piece of her story, both the paths she had walked and the ones she had never taken. At the far end of the hall, a figure stood, waiting. Daisy's heart skipped a beat as she realized who it was. Her mother. Daisy's breath caught in her throat as she saw her mother standing at the far end of the hall. The figure was hazy, like a ghost made of light and shadow, but there was no mistaking her. Her mother's eyes, once so full of warmth and life, now gazed at Daisy with an intensity that chilled her to the bone. "I've been waiting for you," her mother said, her voice echoing through the hall like a distant memory. Daisy took a hesitant step forward, her heart pounding in her chest. "Why didn't you come back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happened to you?" Her mother's expression softened, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Daisy had never seen before. "I searched for the truth, just as you have. But the truth, it's more than you can imagine, more than anyone can bear." Daisy clenched her fists, fighting the tears that threatened to spill over. "You left me. I had to grow up alone. Why?" Her mother's figure seemed to flicker, as though the weight of her own sorrow was too much to hold on to. "I didn't want to leave you, Daisy, but once you see the truth, there's no going back. I thought I could handle it, but I was wrong." Daisy took another step forward, her voice breaking. "But you're here now. We can face it together." Her mother shook her head. "I'm not truly here, Daisy. What you see is only a reflection, a memory. I'm lost to this place, just as you will be if you continue down this path." Daisy's heart sank, but she refused to give up. "I'm not afraid. I've come too far to turn back." Her mother's gaze softened again, but this time there was a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "You're stronger than I was. But be careful, Daisy. The truth will test you in ways you can't imagine." As her mother's figure began to fade, Daisy felt a surge of determination. She had to know. She had to uncover the truth, not just for herself, but for her mother's sake as well. With renewed resolve, Daisy turned toward the next doorway, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Daisy stepped through the doorway, the last words of her mother echoing in her mind. "The truth will test you." She felt the weight of that statement like a heavy stone in her chest. This next step felt like plunging into the unknown, deeper than she had ever gone before. But she had no choice. She couldn't stop now. On the other side of the doorway, the world shifted again. She found herself standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into a vast, swirling abyss. The air was thick with a strange, electric energy that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. The abyss below seemed bottomless, a pit of blackness that devoured everything around it. A voice, faint but distinct, drifted up from the darkness below. "Daisy." It was the same whisper she had heard since the beginning, the voice that had led her here. Her heart pounded as she looked down into the swirling void. There was no going back now. The truth was somewhere in that abyss, and she had to find it. Without hesitation, she took a deep breath and leaped into the darkness. The fall was endless. Daisy's body felt weightless as she plummeted through the abyss, the wind rushing past her ears like a deafening roar. The world around her dissolved into a blur of shadows and faint, flickering lights. She couldn't tell how long she had been falling. Seconds, minutes, hours? Time felt meaningless here. Then, without warning, the descent slowed, and Daisy felt herself being gently lowered onto solid ground. Her feet touched the surface, and she stood in a place unlike any she had ever seen before. It was a vast, cavernous expanse, illuminated by strange glowing symbols etched into the walls. The ground beneath her feet was smooth and cold, made of a material that shimmered with an otherworldly light. In the center of the room stood a massive, ornate door, towering, ancient, and covered in intricate carvings. This door was different from the others she had passed through. It radiated a sense of finality. Daisy's pulse quickened. She knew, without a doubt, that behind this door lay the truth she had been seeking. But as she approached, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Are you ready to see?" the voice asked, sounding both curious and mocking at once. Daisy paused before the door, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch its surface. The cold metal sent a shock through her fingers, and for a moment, doubt crept into her mind. Could she handle whatever was waiting for her on the other side? But then, she remembered her mother. She had come this far. There was no turning back now. With a deep breath, Daisy pushed the door open. The door creaked as it swung open, revealing a chamber bathed in an eerie, golden light. Inside, the air was thick with an almost tangible energy, as if the very atmosphere was alive with the knowledge contained within. The walls were lined with shelves, and on each shelf sat countless scrolls, books, and strange artifacts, all ancient, covered in dust, and pulsing faintly with the power they held. In the center of the room, a pedestal stood, and on it lay a single book, bound in worn leather. Daisy's breath hitched as she approached it, the whispers intensifying, swirling around her like a vortex. "This is it," the voice said, clearer now, "the truth." Daisy reached out, her fingers brushing the book's cover. Instantly, a flood of images and emotions surged through her mind, memories, visions of places and times she had never seen, moments from lives that were not her own. The weight of it all was overwhelming, but Daisy held firm, refusing to let go. Slowly, she opened the book. The pages were filled with strange symbols and writings, none of which she could understand. But as she flipped through them, the meaning began to take shape in her mind. This wasn't just any book, it was a record of the world itself, a history of everything that had ever happened and everything that ever would. Daisy's heart pounded as she realized what she was holding. The truth was not a single event or moment. It was the entire fabric of reality, woven together from countless threads of time and space. And at the center of it all, she saw her mother, standing at the crossroads of fate, a key player in a larger game than Daisy had ever imagined. But there was more. As she continued to read, she saw something else, herself, standing on the same precipice her mother had stood on, faced with the same choice. Daisy's chest tightened. She was part of this too. Her journey had not been just about uncovering the past. It had been leading her toward a destiny she hadn't even known existed. The weight of the truth pressed down on Daisy, heavy and suffocating. She had come seeking answers, but now that she had found them, she wasn't sure she could handle what she had discovered. Everything she thought she knew was only a fraction of a larger, more complex reality. The past, the present, the future, it was all connected, and she was part of it, whether she wanted to be or not. But as the truth unfolded before her, Daisy began to understand why her mother had disappeared, why she had chosen to walk this path. The truth was powerful, but it was also dangerous. It consumed those who sought it, demanding more than they were prepared to give. Daisy's hands shook as she closed the book and stepped back from the pedestal. The room seemed to pulse with energy, as though it were alive, watching her, waiting to see what she would do next. The whispers had grown silent now, leaving only a heavy, oppressive stillness in their wake. As Daisy stood there, staring at the book that had shown her the truth, she realized that she now faced the same choice her mother had faced all those years ago. She could walk away, leave this place behind, and live her life as it had been before, or she could embrace the truth and become part of something far greater than herself. But with that choice came a cost. The truth had already claimed her mother. Would it claim her as well? Daisy's heart raced as she weighed her choices. The gravity of the truth hung heavily in the air, and she felt it pressing down on her chest. She glanced back at the book. its pages still whispering promises of knowledge, of power, but at what cost? "What do you choose, Daisy?" the voice returned, resonating in the silence. It felt like a challenge, a test. "Will you embrace your destiny, or will you turn your back on it?" Daisy closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. She could feel her mother's presence in the chamber, a reminder of the sacrifices made and the paths taken. The truth was daunting, but it also offered the possibility of understanding, of breaking free from the chains of ignorance that had bound her for so long. "I choose to face it," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I won't turn away." As soon as she spoke those words, the room erupted in light. The glowing symbols on the walls pulsed with energy, and the book on the pedestal opened itself, pages flipping wildly until they settled on a specific entry. The text glowed with a radiant light, illuminating Daisy's face. "Then you are ready," the voice said, softer now, "ready to see the tapestry of your existence." Daisy stepped closer to the pedestal, her eyes drawn to the glowing text. As she began to read, the words flowed into her mind, weaving together like threads in a tapestry. She saw images flash before her, glimpses of her life, her mother's life, moments of pain and joy intertwined in a beautiful but chaotic dance. Each thread represented a choice, a consequence, and a ripple through time. She saw her mother standing at a crossroads, just as she had seen in the mirrors earlier. In one path, her mother chose safety, while in another, she chose truth. Each choice had led to different futures, not just for her, but for Daisy as well. Tears streamed down Daisy's face as she witnessed the struggles her mother had faced, the sacrifices she had made. "Why didn't you tell me?" Daisy cried out, the emotions overwhelming her. "Why did you have to go?" The room pulsed with a gentle energy, and the voice replied, "Some truths are too heavy to share, and some paths are too dangerous to tread alone. Your mother sought to protect you, just as you seek to protect her memory." Daisy's heart ached at the thought. Her mother had loved her enough to bear the weight of the truth alone, and now Daisy felt that same love coursing through her. It was time to break the cycle of silence. As Daisy immersed herself in the tapestry of existence, she realized that every choice created new possibilities. The colors swirled around her, vibrant and chaotic, representing lives intertwined, destinies colliding. She began to see connections she hadn't noticed before: friends, enemies, loves lost and found, all part of a grand design that was constantly shifting and evolving. But there was a dark thread running through the tapestry, a shadow that lurked just out of reach. Daisy felt it tug at her, a reminder that not all choices led to light. It represented fear, pain, and the very real possibility of loss. "What is this?" Daisy whispered, pointing to the dark thread that twisted through the vibrant colors. "That is the shadow of truth," the voice explained, somber. "It is the consequence of knowledge unshared, of paths taken in fear. It represents the sacrifice that comes with knowing." Daisy shuddered, realizing that this dark thread was woven through her own life as well. Her own fears had shaped her journey, leading her to this moment. But she didn't want fear to dictate her choices any longer. In that moment, something inside Daisy shifted. She felt a surge of determination, a refusal to let fear win. She could choose differently. Just as her mother had faced her fears, Daisy would do the same. "I will not let the shadows control me," she declared, her voice rising with conviction. "I will choose the light, even if it means facing the darkness head-on." The chamber trembled at her declaration, the walls vibrating with energy. The glowing symbols began to swirl faster, the colors merging and shifting around her. The dark thread pulsed in response, as though challenging her resolve. "Are you prepared for the consequences?" the voice asked, a hint of warning laced within. "I am," Daisy replied, her heart steady. "I choose to illuminate the darkness." With that, She reached out to the dark thread, her fingers brushing against its surface. A rush of energy surged through her, a wave of emotions, fear, anger, sorrow, but she held firm, focusing on the light within her. As she did, the dark thread began to unravel, dissolving into shimmering particles that floated away into the ether. The chamber brightened, the colors of the tapestry blooming like flowers in spring. Daisy stepped back, gasping as she witnessed the transformation. The dark thread had given way to a brilliant spectrum of colors, illuminating the entire chamber. The walls pulsed with energy, and the book on the pedestal glowed brighter than ever. The voice returned, stronger and filled with warmth. You have chosen the path of light, Daisy. With this choice, you have the power to change your destiny and the destinies of others. Daisy felt a rush of hope surge through her. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger. But even as joy filled her heart, a thought nagged at her. What about my mother? Can I save her? The energy in the chamber shifted again, the tapestry swirling with possibilities. The truth is not a destination, but a journey. Your mother is part of this tapestry, and so are you. The choices you make will weave new paths. With a newfound sense of purpose, Daisy turned back to the book. Show me how, she said, her voice filled with determination. As Daisy spoke, the book opened again, its pages glowing with potential. The symbols danced across the surface, illuminating her surroundings with a radiant light. The tapestry swirled around her, revealing new paths branching out in all directions. Each choice you make can lead to a new outcome, the voice explained. You have the power to shape your reality, to rewrite your story and that of your mother's. Daisy felt a surge of energy coursing through her, and she focused on the threads connected to her mother's path. She envisioned a way to reach her, to bridge the gap that had kept them apart for so long. With each thought, the tapestry responded, the colors shifting and weaving together in intricate patterns. Daisy saw flashes of possibility, moments where she could intervene, choices that could lead her mother back to safety. But as the paths unfolded, she also felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Every choice had consequences. Every action could create ripples, affecting not just her life, but the lives of others. Remember, Daisy, the voice cautioned, with each choice comes a consequence. Are you prepared to face them? Daisy took a deep breath, steadying herself. I am. I have to be. I can't let fear dictate my choices any longer. The tapestry shimmered in response, reflecting her determination. As she reached out again, she concentrated on a specific thread, the one that connected her to her mother. The colors danced and twinkled like stars, and Daisy felt a strong pull toward it. Guide me, she whispered. Show me the way to her. The tapestry responded, illuminating a path that shimmered with promise. Daisy followed the thread, feeling its warmth envelop her. With each step, she could feel the connection strengthening, like a bridge forming between their two worlds. Suddenly, the chamber began to vibrate again, and the colors intensified. Daisy's heart raced as she felt herself being pulled into the tapestry, the energy swirling around her like a whirlwind. The sensation was overwhelming as Daisy was swept into the tapestry, the world around her dissolving into a kaleidoscope of colors and light. She felt weightless, floating through the vibrant threads that represented countless lives and choices. As she traveled, she glimpsed fragments of her mother's journey, her struggles, her triumphs, and the sacrifices she had made. Each moment played out before Daisy like a vivid dream, the emotions swirling around her like a storm. Finally, the colors began to coalesce, and she found herself standing in a familiar place, a small, sunlit garden that felt both real and unreal. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, and Daisy's heart swelled with hope. And there, in the center of the garden, stood her mother. The figure was ethereal, surrounded by a soft glow that made her seem almost otherworldly. But Daisy could see the pain in her mother's eyes, the burden of the choices she had made. Daisy? Her mother's voice was a whisper, filled with disbelief and longing. Is it really you? With tears streaming down her face, Daisy stepped forward. Yes, Mom, I'm here. I found you. The moment their eyes met, Daisy felt a surge of love wash over her, a connection stronger than anything she had ever known. She rushed forward, embracing her mother tightly. I thought I lost you, Daisy cried, her voice choked with emotion. I've been searching for so long. Her mother held her close, the warmth of their connection soothing the ache in Daisy's heart. I never wanted to leave you, Daisy. I thought I was protecting you from the truth. But I need to know, Daisy insisted, pulling back to look into her mother's eyes. I've seen the tapestry. I understand now. We can change our destinies together. Her mother's expression shifted, a mixture of fear and hope crossing her features. But the truth is dangerous. My love, it comes with a price. Are you sure you're ready for that? I am, Daisy declared, her voice strong. Together, we can face whatever comes next. I refuse to let fear decide our fate. With renewed determination, Daisy and her mother stood side by side, ready to confront the challenges that lay ahead. The garden around them pulsed with vibrant energy, a reflection of their newfound bond and shared purpose. Let's rewrite our story, Daisy said, looking at the shimmering tapestry that surrounded them. Together, they focused on the threads that connected their lives, weaving new paths filled with light and hope. With each choice they made, the colors brightened, illuminating the dark shadows that had once loomed over them. As they embraced their destinies, the tapestry transformed into a radiant mosaic of possibilities, a testament to their love, resilience, and the power of truth. In that moment, Daisy knew they would not only change their lives but inspire others to face their own shadows and step into the light. And as the garden glowed with promise, Daisy and her mother stepped forward, hand in hand, ready to embrace the future together.